All right, so, we're diving into this whole cytotoxic waste thing.
Okay.
And it's pretty wild when you think about it. We're talking
Yeah.
about substances, right? Potent enough to take on some serious illnesses. But
Yeah.
then how do you actually get rid of them safely? That's a whole other puzzle.
It really is.
This is a medical mystery.
It is. It's fascinating how something so essential for treatment
Right.
needs such specialized care after it's done its job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're talking about leftover chemo drugs,
Yeah.
antivirals,
Yeah.
anything designed to basically target and neutralize those harmful cells.
Right. Got to get rid of those bad boys.
Exactly. Hence the term cytotoxic.
Makes sense.
But here's the thing. We can't just toss this stuff out with the regular trash.
No way. Definitely not.
These materials need, like, their own whole rule book.
Right. They need special treatment.
They do.
Okay, so speaking of special treatment, I was looking at some stuff about GIC medical waste disposal,
Yeah,
and they really emphasize this whole thing about responsible disposal.
absolutely. It's crucial.
What are the actual risks if someone doesn't handle this cytotoxic waste properly?
So GIC's right to emphasize that because improper handling, it can lead to some major problems.
Okay.
We're talking about contamination of water sources, the
Yikes.
soil,
Wow.
even the air. And then it's not just about the environment.
Right, people too.
Exactly. Accidental exposure, even for healthcare workers who, are trained, or the waste handlers themselves.
Yeah.
It could be really risky, so they're right to be cautious.
And speaking of being cautious, GIC seems really big on following the rules. Like their website is practically a giant flashing neon sign.
Right. That says compliance is king.
They're all about it.
So what is it about Canada specifically
Okay.
that makes this waste disposal so complicated? Like, I saw you had highlighted some stuff about Canadian regulations
Yeah.
and what you were looking at.
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because Canada's system, it's not just one set of rules for everybody.
Oh, okay.
It's almost like, remember those Choose Your Own Adventure books?
Oh, yeah.
Each province and territory gets to kind of add its own plot twists.
So what you're saying is a hospital, say in Nova Scotia, might be handling things differently than one, I don't know, in Alberta.
You got it.
That seems very complex.
That's exactly what it is.
Right.
And that's where a company like GIC comes in.
Makes sense. Because they're like the master navigators of this whole regulatory maze, right?
Yeah.
They have to stay updated.
So they know all the loopholes, they know all the rules.
They're going to know everything to make sure their clients, wherever those clients are,
Right, they're
covered.
tracking and complying.
they've got their back.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're like, what? The superheroes of cytotoxic waste disposal?
In a way, yeah. It's not just about knowing the rules, though.
Okay, yeah.
They also talk about these secure containment options.
Yeah, and I was curious about that too. Like, what does that actually look like in the real world?
Yeah, so remember those container regulations you mentioned?
Right.
That's a perfect example. So GIC is going to know, based on what's being disposed of
Okay.
and where you are, what kind of container you need.
It's very specific. It is. They might use like a really rigid puncture-proof container with a special liner for cytotoxic waste,
Okay.
whereas something else might go in a regular Sharps container,
Right, so they take all the guesswork out of it for these facilities.
Exactly. That's the idea.
Okay.
Take the stress away.
Which I imagine is a huge relief.
Oh, for sure. Because who needs that extra stress?
No one. Not with this stuff.
Exactly.
But then what about the disposal itself? They mention these advanced processing and disposal methods.
Right.
And it all sounds very, I don't know, like high-tech and mysterious.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
What's the inside scoop there?
Well, I can't give away all their secrets.
Of course not. Trade secrets.
Right. But basically, they've invested in some serious technology
Okay.
to neutralize or break down those dangerous parts of the waste.
Okay.
But in a way that still meets those really strict environmental rules, right? And it's not like a one-size-fits-all.
Oh, interesting.
It's very tailored to what they're dealing with at that moment.
So there's no, like, giant lasers vaporizing the waste.
Not that I know of, but that would be pretty cool.
Right. Okay, but seriously, can you get an example of one of these advanced methods? Like, what's one way they might actually do this?
Sure. One they might use is something called pyrolysis.
Pyrolysis.
Yeah, think of it like a super high heat oven.
Okay.
But instead of baking cookies, it's breaking down those harmful compounds into something much less toxic.
So it looks like a very controlled burn.
A very controlled burn, exactly.
Interesting. So it's much cleaner than, say, just incinerating it.
Oh, for sure. Much more controlled.
Pyrolysis, huh? This sounds way more sophisticated than my oven at home.
Right.
I mean, I guess it makes sense, given what we're talking about here.
Yeah, got to up the game when it's this kind of hazard. Right,
Exactly.
though.
But, it's interesting to me how GIC, they've got this very, I don't know, high-tech approach,
Yeah.
but it's paired with this customer-focused way of doing things.
Yeah, they seem to get that balance right.
Like, they're all about no contracts, which you don't see that very often, do you?
Not in this industry, no.
Right.
Usually it's
Yeah.
all about locking people in,
Right.
long-term commitments, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Makes sense for some businesses, but...
So is that a good deal or a risky gamble, this no contract thing?
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
It really depends, GIC actually does a good job, I think, of laying out... Here's what to consider.
Okay.
If you're a small clinic and your needs change a lot,
Yeah.
that flexibility is huge.
That makes sense, yeah.
But if you're a big hospital and you're like, we've got this stuff coming out of our ears all the time,
All right, constant stream.
maybe a contract makes more sense for stability.
Yeah, like knowing what you're going to get.
Exactly. Steady pricing, guaranteed service, that kind of thing.
It's like choosing off the menu versus like a prefix,
I like that analogy.
Sometimes you want the choice.
Sometimes you want someone to just decide for you.
Right, exactly.
Take away the decision fatigue.
Okay, so GIC, clearly all about safety, the rules, taking the stress out of it, right?
You got that down.
But one thing that really jumped out at me was their thing about training and customer support.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's like they want to make sure their clients actually know what's up.
They're not just like, here's your bin, see you later,
Right.
which I think is really smart.
Yeah. What's your take on that?
Well, because remember that regulatory maze we talked about?
Mm-hmm.
It's complicated.
It is, very much so.
So if they can give the people handling this stuff the knowledge,
Right.
it's empowering,
Yeah, like they're not just getting rid of the problem.
Right.
They're actually giving you the tools to deal with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it builds trust, right?
Yeah, it does.
Because you're like, okay, they're not just trying to,
They're not hiding anything.
they're not hiding anything.
They're like, we're the experts, but we want you to be an expert too.
Exactly. It's like, we're partners in this.
That's a good way to put it. It's like this sense of partnership.
Exactly. And they're available 24/7.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. Any questions, concerns?
That's impressive.
Yeah. You're not going to get like a voicemail at 3 a.m,
Right, right.
which, let's be real, in healthcare, sometimes you need that.
Oh, absolutely. Things happen.
Things happen. So that availability, it makes a difference.
That shows they care.
It shows they care and that they're invested,
Right. Long term.
not just like a transactional kind of thing.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to their story, right? Like how they started.
Absolutely. This wasn't some like boardroom decision.
Yeah, yeah.
This was people from healthcare saying, we've got to do better.
It came from a need. That's so cool.
It came from a need. So they're not just experts in like the technical stuff.
Right. They know the people they're serving.
Exactly.
Great.
They get it. And you can tell, I think, in everything they do.
So they're not afraid to be like, we've been there.
They've been there. They get it.
Okay, so I'm sensing a theme here.
What's that?
GIC seems to be really proactive. Like, not just following the rules, but kind of like,
Ahead of the game.
yeah, like they're anticipating what's next, which in a field like this, I bet is important
Oh, for sure.
because things change.
Oh, constantly. New treatments, new tech.
You tech.
Always something new.
So they've got to be ready.
Always have to be adapting.
Do you think that's why they're successful? Like, they're not just, I don't know.
They're not intimidated by change.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of it.
Right.
Because it's not enough to just like check the boxes anymore.
Right. Got to be forward thinking.
Exactly. And I think that's what sets them apart because it's not just about getting rid of the waste.
It's got to be ethical.
It's got to be ethical. It's got to be responsible.
Like you said, thinking about the future.
Thinking about the future. Exactly.
They're like the Elon Musk of cytotoxic waste.
Okay. Maybe let's not go that far.
Just a little joke.
I appreciate the humor.
But you get my point. They're pushing the boundaries a bit.
Yeah. They're definitely not afraid to be like, what if we tried this? Which I think is exciting.
Okay, let's shift gears for a sec. We've talked a lot about GIC,
Yeah.
but zooming out a little bit, what's the future look like for this whole thing, cytotoxic waste?
That's the big question, isn't it?
I mean, right now, it's all complex procedures, specialized companies like GIC.
Yeah.
But what if down the line, it all changes?
It's a good question. And honestly, it's something researchers are thinking about right now. Yeah, because think about it like this. What if, instead of figuring out how to, like, safely scrap a gas guzzler car,
Okay.
We just stopped making them in the first place.
I see what you're saying.
And that's kind of the approach with some of these new cancer treatments.
Oh, interesting. You mean like making the treatments themselves less toxic from the start?
Exactly. Remember in your research that thing about targeted therapies?
Yeah.
Scientists are working on treatments that are like super precise.
Wow.
So they hone in on just the cancerous cells. Less collateral damage.
Okay, that's amazing.
Fewer nasty byproducts ending up as waste.
So less waste to even worry about in the first place. But even with those breakthroughs, I mean, there's always going to be some waste, right?
Right. There's always going to be something.
So what's coming down the pipeline for that?
Well, this is where it gets really cool. So that pyrolysis thing we talked about, that's just one thing.
Okay.
There's a whole field, right, called bioremediation.
Bioremediation, what's that?
So they use microorganisms, basically, tiny little helpers, to break down hazardous substances.
So it's like a microscopic cleanup crew.
Exactly. They do the dirty work for us.
That's wild. So are we talking about a future where, I don't know, cytotoxic waste just isn't a big scary thing anymore?
It's hard to say for sure, but the possibilities are really exciting.
Yeah.
Imagine these really advanced treatments, right?
Yeah.
Combined with disposal methods that are like
Yeah.
super efficient, good for the planet.
Okay.
We might get to a point where managing this waste is way easier than it is now.
Now that's a future I'm into. It's really cool to see how this whole field is like constantly evolving.
Yeah.
From how the treatments are developed to how we deal with the aftermath.
It speaks to something really important, though, right? It's not just about ticking boxes and regulations.
It's bigger than that.
It's bigger. It's about protecting ourselves and the environment.
Absolutely.
GIC might be one part of the solution, but they're part of a much bigger movement.
Right. Like it takes a village.
It really does. And it's a journey, right?
Yeah.
It takes everyone being on board, learning, being open to new ideas.
And a little bit of hope, too.
Oh, definitely a little hope. I mean, we've come a long way with cytotoxic waste, but the future is looking pretty promising.
I like the sound of that. Well, this deep dive has been quite the journey. We've gone from the nitty-gritty of regulations to, like, peeking into the labs where they're making these amazing new treatments.
It's been fun exploring all this with you.
And a huge thank you to you, our listener, for sending us down this rabbit hole of knowledge. We always say the best deep dives are fueled by your curiosity. We hope this exploration of cytotoxic waste, it's left you with some food for thought, maybe even a little bit of that hope for the future.
Hear, hear.
Until next time, keep those research requests coming.